with Steve Wilson and Orville Susong of the Friday Night Locker Room. We're here to discuss the upcoming games this week on the Space Coast. Gentlemen, why don't we start off with the game that you'll be at, Titusville and Cocoa. We've got an upstart Titusville team, has a pretty good-looking offense this year, and we also have Coach Dan Diesel back on the sidelines as defensive coordinator for Titusville. Will that make the difference for the Terriers? Can they stay in this game with Cocoa?
Well, I think Wayne Lawrence trying to be a good friend to John Wilkinson and book this game after Cocoa lost 2 games week after week. I think it's a little bit much for the Titusville Terriers, even though they are an upstart team. Their offense is a very good offense this year. They got one of the best running backs in the county. But I think it's a little bit more than they bargained for when they take on the Tigers. Tigers haven't played yet, so they're itching to hit somebody.
And you mentioned 2 games gone. Now let's just to be clear on that. Cocoa was supposed to play 2 games. They were both against statewide and national competition, correct?
Yeah, that is correct. And both of them backed out, unfortunately, at the last minute, and it really left the Tigers scrambling to pick up the game. So as Orville mentioned, Coach Lawrence and Jason Burley, the athletic director, jumped on board and did schedule Cocoa for Friday night. It will be an interesting game. I tend to agree with Orville. I think it's going to be a real challenge for the Terriers. They've been very impressive the first couple of weeks. Their win against Melbourne, especially, 19-0 shutout. Defense played well. Yusuf DeReese has a chance to be one of the top quarterbacks in Brevard County before he's finished. He's only a 10th grader. But I think it's a tall order to ask the Terriers to compete on the field this year with what I think is a loaded Cocoa high school football team.
And the other thing you have to look at for the rest of the season, they also have to beat either Merritt Island or Palm Bay to get into the playoffs, which is going to be another big, huge thing for them to overcome. Even though they were only 4-6 last year, I expect the Titusville Terriers to be over 500 this year.
And getting back to Cocoa, how good of a season might we see from quarterback Bruce Judson? We saw what he did last year in his first year behind the center for Cocoa. Now with that whole year behind him worth of experience and the off-season worth of training and the preseason with Coach Wilkinson, do you think we could see almost a record-setting performance from him this year?
Yeah, I think we can. Last year he was named a 9th grade, a freshman All-American. This year he's a preseason All-American. He has the running backs to take the load off of him, so they're not going to rely 100% on Judson. In my mind, about the only question mark the Tigers have is their offensive line. They lost a lot of players to graduation, but they're the kind of team that reloads. They're just not going to rebuild. The defensive side of the ball is going to be fantastic, but to get back to your question, Judson can have a big-time year. It depends on how Coach Wilkinson turns him loose, how many pass attempts he allows him. Cocoa's going to do it all. They're going to run, they're going to pass, they're just going to be solid, and look for Judson to have a big-time year.
Well, anytime we talk about Cocoa, one of the perennial powers in the county, it's only natural to bring up some of the others, and we'll go from that game to Palm Bay versus Heritage. Heritage, comparatively newer dynasty, if you want to call them that, or local power. Palm Bay, as we've known for the past, 2 decades, has been a power. We know what we're going to get from Burke. Heritage is a little bit more of a question mark with their new coach, but we've seen some of their players in the off-season and in the spring drills and the spring camp over there at Merritt Island. They appear to be just as quick and just as large. What's your take on this Heritage team? I know you guys were supposed to see them last week until that storm came through.
Yeah, we sat down in a press box for 2.5 hours and did a preseason show, really just trying to wait for them to make the decision whether they would whether they were going to cancel the game or not. I think my biggest thing is whether Mark Ainsley, the head coach now of the Heritage Panthers, can go from a squad of 20 to 25 players that he had at Holy Trinity last year into a squad of over 70 or 80 on varsity. That's going to be a big thing for them to, I think, for him to overcome. Can he go from the small mentality to a big full-size program? I think he has the capability of doing it, but can he do it in the first year? They lost a lot of players. I don't think Heritage will go 11-1 this year.
Yeah, I was able to see Ainsley working at the FHSAA clinic they had at Merritt Island back, I want to say, in April or May. And he seems to be a very hands-on type coach who really has that smaller school mindset you referred to, where you can tell he likes to really mold players individually every chance he gets. Anytime he had the chance, he was pulling those kids aside and working with them one-on-one. He just also seemed like a great motivator. So I'm curious to see how they'll do this year.
Yeah, I think he's going to do well. I think he's a very good football coach, and I think he has a lot of talent coming back this year. One of the things I hear, and I've heard the last few weeks, is Heritage lost too many students to graduation, but all schools do. But in the southern part of the county, I was told years ago, look out for Heritage High School. At some point in time, they're going to be one of the top schools in Brevard County year in and year out. And I think they're close to that because of the talent in South Brevard. But the two Joshes, Gaines and Harden, I think they're going to be the difference Friday night against Palm Bay. I really think the Panthers are going to come out on top. They're at home. They're going to be fired up. A lot of question marks early in the season. This is only week 2. How good is Palm Bay? Sakai Lindsay at running back, they're going to score some points and move the ball. But I just think Coach Ainsley is going to get off on the right foot, and Heritage is going to do well. Are they going to have the record they had last year? Probably not. That was a big-time year for Coach Ulmer and the Panthers. But I look for the Panthers to do well Friday night.
You look at the Heritage Panthers, again, they have to replace their quarterback from last year, Clinton Mox, and I think that's going to be a tough thing for them to do on a consistent basis. And they also lost 8 defensive starters, which has got to do something on the defensive side. Now, the first game that they're going to play this year now that counts is going to be Palm Bay. Palm Bay's going to run the ball right at them, and I don't think the defense for the first game of the season is going to keep up with Palm Bay. I like Palm Bay in this one.
Yeah, we always know we're going to see smash mouth, north-south style football, that type of game from Coach Burke and his squad. Moving on to another matchup featuring a team from the south part of the county, along with a team from the central part of the county. We have Merritt Island and Melbourne. 2 familiar faces there, with Coach McLean once again leading the Mustangs, and Coach Wilson with the Melbourne Bulldogs. That seems to be 2 programs in pretty similar situations with their offensive staff. Both of them are coming off seasons where they had well-known senior quarterback leadership, and it's almost as if they're forging a new identity this year.
You know, the Melbourne Bulldogs, we had the chance to cover them 2 weeks ago on the Friday night locker room against Titusville. Are we going to see the team that played against Titusville that didn't score a point, or are we going to see the team that scored a ton of points last week? I think there are a lot of unknowns in this game on both sides of the field, both for the Bulldogs and the Mustangs. I'm going to let Orville make the pick first, and I'll kind of see which direction he goes. But Melbourne is capable of running the football. They're going to do it with B.J. Daniels and Chris Singh, and that's what Todd Wilson is going to do. They're going to run the ball, and they're going to play defense. How well they do it, it obviously will determine the score of the game Friday night. Orville's going to make his pick first, and once again, I will follow his lead.
Well, you know, you look at Merritt Island, you know Jeff McLean's been there, 8 years now. He has a very stable program, and he has a very solid coaching staff on both sides of the ball. The thing is, they lost their whole offensive line last year due to graduation, and they lost to Vieira in a preseason game 14-3. Vieira is very up and coming, we know that, but you know, there's a lot of things that Jeff McLean might not have done in the preseason game that he would do in a regular season game. So you got to kind of throw that out the window. Merritt Island not only won the district last year, but had to beat Palm Bay 2 times in order to go through the playoffs. And I think that's a big thing right there for the Merritt Island Mustangs to do. They are playing Melbourne this Friday. They beat Melbourne last year 14-7, and I think it's still going to be a very close game this week.
Yeah, I agree. I had a chance to see Merritt Island in that game versus Vieira. Of course, that was an unofficial game, but they didn't look too sharp. Knowing McLean the way we do, we knew we were going to see 2 flat performances from that offense. They came back and bounced back last week against New Smyrna pretty strongly. We know that's no slouch of a program up there, just up the coast. So I expect to see another strong outing from the Mustangs offense as we go into this weekend's matchup. That brings us to the next one, O'Galley versus Space Coast, another big matchup this week. 2 programs with younger coaches, and Coach Powers at O'Galley and then Coach Owens at Space Coast. Again, programs that have a lot of new personnel coming in. What's your take on these 2 teams?
Well, you know, you look at O'Galley, Tim Powers has been there 5 years. Jake Owens only at Space Coast now for the 2nd season. But the big thing for Space Coast, I think, Nick Rittenhouse, 3,300 yards and 35 touchdowns last year. that's going to be tough to replace for anybody, let alone Space Coast. But I think they've got a couple guys that can do it. Alex Cavender is going to be the guy they put under the center and see if he can duplicate that. I don't think he'll duplicate it, but I think he's going to have a good year, and that will be the thing. You know, they won over Warner Christian in the spring game, but a lot of things that they were runner-up, made the playoffs last year, which surprised a lot of people, I think. So on the other hand, O'Galley being in a Class 7A versus a 4A for Space Coast, you would expect bigger, stronger, not faster, but bigger and stronger players coming up for O'Galley. They were the runner-up last year to Melbourne, and one of the teams that beat Vieira. So I still like O'Galley this year, this early in the season anyway.
I'm going to go on the opposite side of the field. I like the Vipers this week, I think. The loss of Rittenhouse, there's no question that's going to hurt, but they have a quarterback that can throw the football. They have maybe as good a pair of receivers in the county. Take away the Tigers from Cocoa High School, but I think Space Coast is going to score some points. Elijah Millage, a former Friday night locker room player of the game, coming back again next year to anchor the defense. I'll look for the Vipers to defeat O'Galley by 10 points.
Okay, now we can move on to the lightning round. We've got six games here to go through. If you guys want to just give me a quick thought on each game and who you think might prevail, let's see if we can do it in maybe a sentence or less.
Well, the Astronaut War Eagles, they play St. Cloud this week. Astronaut in the Class 5A District 12, as we all know. Last year, 3-7 overall. They lost the preseason game to Bayside 34-14. I think it's going to be another disappointing year for the Astronaut War Eagles.
It's going to be a tough Friday night. I'd love to see the War Eagles win the football game. St. Cloud, I think, has a few more athletes this year, and I think they'll defeat Astronaut.
I agree. I think Astronaut is undermanned this year, and I think they'll fall. I think Coach Halleck's a great coach and a great guy, but they just don't have the personnel this year. Speaking of low personnel, let's look at Rockledge and Bayside. Rockledge is a program that seems like it's really been hurt by the depleted roster this year.
Well, you know, the biggest thing that's hurt Rockledge the last couple of years is players transferring out for one reason or another, going to different areas. Cocoa and Merritt Island both benefiting from some starters and seniors leaving the Rockledge program and going to those two schools respectively. Rockledge with a 3-7 overall record last year. They won against O'Galley in the preseason, but it was a varsity and a junior varsity contest. And then they lost last week 53-7 to Vieira, which might tell you whether Vieira is for real or not.
Right. Can Rockledge bounce back this week? Kids are more resilient than coaches are. They can bounce back, but they're not going to against Bayside High School. The Bears are going to win the game.
Moving on to MCC and Cocoa Beach. Cocoa Beach took a pounding last week from Titusville, and that I believe was 57-0 final. MCC, on the other hand, defeated the well-known school Columbine out of Colorado over there in a special game they played over at Disney. MCC looks just as dangerous, if not even more talented this year, guys. Do you expect to see much of a game there? I think MCC will roll pretty easily through that one.
Well, Columbine was like the number 5th team in the state of Colorado, and they handled them nicely. And they also handled John Earl Leonard in their preseason game 45-16. I think Billy Hilton will not get win number 1 this year against MCC. I think that's going to be kind of a one-sided game. You know, you have to look at Brandon Ziarno, threw for 3 touchdowns last week, or against the Leonard when they played them. And when you have 2 Erdmans on the field, plus Brandon Ziarno, it's tough to pick against them.
Yeah, this one could get ugly in a hurry. Unfortunately for the Minutemen, I look for MCC to roll without any difficulty.
Another game that on paper doesn't look like it should be too close. Of course, we never know. That's why they play them. But Vieira versus Satellite. Satellite's one of those teams that seems like inconsistent with their offense. One week they show up, one week they don't. Either way, Vieira just looks so loaded on offense with Trey Nixon at receiver. He's got 7 different scholarship offers. Could pretty much pick his school. With that kind of arsenal on their offense, do you see Satellite slowing down Vieira?
No, I don't really think so. You know, they won the preseason game against Merritt Island 14-3. We talked about that earlier. And then they beat Rockledge last week 53-7, even though it was in a rain and lightning type game, bad conditions. Both teams had to play in it. Vieira came out on top and easily beat Rockledge 53-7. I don't think they're going to slow up for Satellite at all.
I agree. Vieira is for real. There's no question about it. They're loaded on both sides of the ball. they're going to do well Friday night.
And then moving on, head coaching debut, or one of the debuts around here was Nate Hooks. He joined Holy Trinity this year. Came over from, I believe it was Titusville. And he inherits the whole new squad. Going up against a school we don't know too much about, and Agape Christian from Orlando. I don't know if you've had a chance to see Holy Trinity all this preseason. I have not, but this is just one of those games where, assuming they come out with their usual squad, Holy Trinity is usually pretty competitive regardless of who's in their regular season.
Yeah, they're going to win big. Holy Trinity, Javon Butler, one of the top receivers in Brevard County. Agape Christian, just a much smaller school. The Tigers are going to win big, no question.
You know, I've known Nate Hooks for many, many, many years. Former Cocoa High School Tiger. Went out of the area, was at Tennessee for a while as a strength and conditioning coach and also a football coach. Moved around a little bit. Finally came back a couple years ago. Was at Titusville to help Wayne Lawrence put in a strength and conditioning program. And we see what so far that's done for Titusville in helping them. Wayne Lawrence keeping that conditioning program in this summer, and everybody now's plus other things, but predicting Titusville to do well. Nate Hooks, I want him to win more than anything. He's a fine young man that brings a lot of Christian thoughts to the program, and he wants to, athletics is second behind schoolwork, and I just think he's great for that program.
And last but not least, I may get in a little bit of trouble for my alma mater for them last, but MICS is playing Central Florida Christian. My Cougars had a tough time last week on their home field, lost by more than 60 points. Coach Nevat is really shorthanded this year, and you can just tell from when they go out there in the field. The heart is there, but the personnel numbers just aren't. I don't know much about Central Florida Christian, but as you just said, schoolwork coming first at Holy Trinity. We all know Dave Nevat's first concern. I mean, he wants to win, but he's also primarily concerned with mentoring these young men. And I think regardless of what happens against Central Florida Christian in the rest of the year, we're going to see his program will remain. He will be okay. But what is your take? Do you think MICS can slowly gain some momentum with what they have there? I mean, they're so shorthanded.
I don't know that they can Friday night. When the Brevard County teams play the out-of-area teams, we turn into Brevard County homers. I'd love to see the Cougars win Friday night. I don't think it's going to happen. But I do see progress being made. I think Coach Nevat has the program going in the right direction, but you mentioned they're undermanned, understaffed, and it's going to be a real challenge. They're not going to quit, there's no question about that, but Friday night's going to be a challenge for them.
Yeah, I watched the first half last week, and they were just outnumbered and outmanned, but the hustle was there. They seemed a little uncoordinated in certain phases, especially on special teams and at the lower level. Orville, I'm sure you'd agree, that's especially where those glaring differences are so apparent on special teams. When you're undermanned, they've only got 20 kids to work with. When you don't have a unit that's specifically designed to go out there in special teams and really go after the ball, you're just going to get burned.
Well, when you only have 20 on a roster, you can only work on so many things at a practice. If you've got 70 people on the roster like Heritage, the special team guys, most of them are working on something else. The offensive line's doing something, the backfield's doing something, the receivers are doing something. Here, Coach David Nevat and his squad has to do a different type of practice, I'm sure, where he doesn't even have enough to go offense defense.
Right.
With only 20 players, it takes 22 to play the game.
Right.
So that's tough. They went 1-9 last year and didn't win that game on the field. It was a forfeit. So they're looking for a win this year just to better the record from last year, and I'm sure they'd like to do it on the field.
Right, and again, if enrollment numbers were a little bit higher, Coach Nevat could have a completely different season, but he's got to deal with the hand that's dealt him, and we've always been very appreciative of him and how he's always given us great time and access to the team. Let's close it up here, guys, with our top 5 list. I'll start off, whether it's in our head or on a pad. I would say thus far, I think, even though I haven't seen Cocoa line up and play a game, we all know the coaching staff they have there and the personnel they have coming back from last year. I'm going to make them my number 1. I'm going to follow that up with, I'll say, Heritage number 2 after the year they had last year, and it appears to be great coaching staff they have. I'm going to say Merritt Island 3, and Palm Bay 4, And I'm going to put Titusville number 5. I think they could be a real sleeper team this year. I was very impressed by what I saw last week in their win against, even albeit a small Cocoa Beach team. It was a shutout, and I think Diesel makes a big difference in that defense this year.
Pretty impressive list, Matt. Let me tell you how it really should read, though.
Okay.
This is how it goes. Cocoa Tigers at number 1. Now, somebody has to beat them before they are dethroned, so to speak. I like the Heritage Panthers at number 2, primarily because of last year. We're so early in the season. That's what my thought process is. To a degree, I think they're loaded on offense. I like the Panthers, number 2. Number 3, I have the Viera Hawks because I think they are for real. I really do. Number 4, I like the Bayside Bears. I think they're going to come back a little bit from last year. Now, I have a tie for 5th. Can I have a tie for 5th?
Sure.
I put everything in what needs to go in and shook it all up good and had 2 teams fall out. And that's the Palm Bay Pirates and the MCC Hustlers. I had them tied for 5th.
Well, at least our top 5 is not like it was last year when it was so easy to pick after we got started during the games. We only were different, maybe 1 or 2. As you two have, I have the Cocoa Tigers coming off as the number 1. I like what Dan Burke is doing with his returning players, the things that we've read in the paper and the things that we've saw. I got Palm Bay at number 2, and I got Brandon Zarno and the Erdman brothers on the number 3 spot with MCC Hustlers. Due to the fact of the 2 games that they've played, they've scored almost 90 points. I got the Viera Hawks at number 4. That scares me. That pick really scares me, having them up that high, because they really haven't done anything.
Right.
And the 2 games they lost last year, their 2 district games, were O'Galley and Melbourne. So that's still going to be an uphill battle for the Viera Hawks to win one of those games to be in the district. Number 5, I got Merritt Island and Heritage. So I have 2 people at number 5. But I've got Cocoa, Palm Bay, MCC, Viera, Merritt Island, and Heritage at number 5.
All right, well, we have to watch them play the games. Here's hoping for much better weather this Friday. And I guess we'll all be at Cocoa Titusville. People can listen to it on 89.3, 90.3 FM, and of course on SpaceCoastDaily.com. We'll have it streamed live there as well. It's the Friday Night Locker Room. You can hear all 3 of us that night. These guys will be doing the play-by-play, Steve and Orville. I'll be, I guess, occasionally chiming in when they let me to offer my insight into the game. And we hope if you guys can make it out to the game that you're able to listen to it on the radio or online. And guys, thanks for spending the time with us this week to give us your take on the games.
Our pleasure. Let's had so much fun. Let's do it again next week.
All right, guys.
Let's
Thanks.
play some football.
That's right.